Sir, Chair.
Question 41, please.
Question 41.
Mr. Speaker, may I have your permission to answer PQs 41 to 45, as well as the PQ filed by Mr. Satyandi Supat that has been scheduled for subsequent seating?
Yes, please.
Mr. Speaker, the world has been facing a global energy crunch since September last year. The price of LNG, or spot liquefied natural gas, rose significantly and remains elevated at more than 3 times the levels as at the start of 2021. While our piped natural gas supply typically helps to moderate the impact from higher LNG prices, there was a series of disruptions and planned depletions to our PNG supply since the second half of 2021. Now, this confluence of factors has resulted and has caused increased volatility in the wholesale electricity prices. Since October 2021, the EMA, or the Energy Market Authority, has implemented a set of measures to enhance Singapore's energy security and stabilize the SWEM, or the Singapore Wholesale Electricity Market prices. Nevertheless, some market participants were adversely affected by the volatility. Between October and December of 2021, 6 electricity retailers exited the market, and another 2 retailers prematurely terminated some of their customers' contracts. As a result, about 9% of all electricity consumer accounts were affected. All affected households and businesses with an average monthly consumption of less than 4 megawatt-hour can switch to SP, or Singapore Power's regulated tariff at any time. Some businesses consuming 4 megawatt-per-hour or more managed to secure plans with other retailers. Now, there remains about 11,000 business consumer accounts, accounting for about 1% of consumers, which have to buy electricity directly from the Singapore Wholesale Electricity Market, or SWEM, and are thus exposed to more volatile electricity prices. To help these businesses, EMA worked with the generation companies, or GenCos for short, to offer monthly fixed price plans under the Temporary Electricity Contracting Support Scheme. We call it TREX for short, in January this year. That's last month. The TREX plans were fully subscribed for January. For the month of February, the initial offering of TREX was also fully subscribed. In response to requests for more such contracts, EMA worked with GenCos and electricity retailers to offer about 645 megawatts of TREX and other plans with significant fixed price components. At least 200 megawatts of the contracts are still available, and we are extending TREX for March, for April, and May. We encourage all consumers without a retail plan to consider taking up these contracts for greater certainty. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the issue of electricity prices. Singapore imports all of our energy and cannot be fully insulated from developments in the global energy market. Well, let me make a correction. Singapore imports our energy, a vast majority of our energy, not all of our energy. We still have some from solar. Now, the higher fuel prices feed into our electricity bills. to reflect the higher costs of electricity production. As I mentioned during the COS, or the Committees of Supply debates last year, we had been enjoying artificially low electricity prices for several years because this is due to an overinvestment in capacity and fuel by the generation companies. I've also alluded to the fact that that was below the cost of generating electricity, and thus it was not sustainable. In fact, if members of the House remember, I also put up a chart that clearly demarcated and showed that the cost of generation was higher than the electricity tariff at that point in time. So an electricity price correction was therefore unavoidable. And the current global energy crunch has precipitated and exacerbated this correction. Now, again, members of the House would have asked, what help is therefore available for the affected businesses? Household and small consumers which need help with their electricity bills can apply to SP services for installment payment plans. Businesses which need financing support can also make use of ESG's programs, such as the Temporary Bridging Loan and Enterprise Financing Scheme SME Working Capital Loan. The 11,000 or so business accounts without a long-term retail contract bear the brunt of the electricity crunch. To help them weather the storm, EMA has worked with GenCos and electricity retailers to reduce the volatility and lower the cost of buying electricity through tracks. Additional monthly contracts offered by GenCos and on the wholesale market for businesses, as I mentioned earlier. For example, Samcor Power Private Limited is offering 1-month fixed price plans at preferred rates to consumers with average monthly consumption of between 4 to 8 megawatt hour. EMA will continue to monitor closely market developments, including heightened geopolitical tensions and their potential impact on global energy prices, and put in place the necessary measures to secure our energy supply, enhance stability, and ensure the orderly functioning of the market. Mr. Speaker, Singapore has an open and competitive electricity market where prices will rise and fall depending on demand and supply conditions and developments in the global energy market. Over the last 20 years, our energy market has served us well. Our electricity supply is one of the most reliable and price competitive amongst major developed cities. Our energy market is now being tested by unprecedented shocks and volatility in the global energy markets. Nevertheless, we are committed to ensuring that Singapore's energy supply remains secure and reliable, and to supporting our vulnerable customers during this period. My only exhortation and urging is that for all consumers to use energy prudently and to adopt energy conservation as a way of life. We will also learn from this episode to see how we can further strengthen and fortify our energy reliance, resilience, and our electricity market. And I'm confident that together we will emerge from this stronger. Thank you very much.
Ms. Jessica Tan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very heartened to hear from Minister that tracks will be extended and also that there are more fixed monthly plans available to the SMEs because the shocks have been quite real. The shocks have been quite real for our SMEs because some have really realized were hit about 3 times. And while we all understand that energy prices, we are takers of that. So on Minister's last plea, can I ask this question of MTI as to what measures are in place to support our companies and especially our SMEs in terms of moving to more sustainable practices as well as better energy consumption practices. And the reason I ask this is because in resource-scarce Singapore, where we're moving more to automation, to digitalization, our companies are actually relying more on energy. So it's good that we're focusing on reliance, resilience of our infrastructure, and we must, but we need to also help our companies pivot and move to being more energy efficient as well. And I hope Minister can share with us what measures will be in place to support them. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Jessica Tan for her very poignant reminder to all of us. There are quite a number of initiatives that we have moved on to. We have encouraged many businesses to consider using energy efficient power systems, including energy efficient light bulbs, even air conditioning. And I think we work very closely with MSE, where we actually would encourage companies to use devices or appliances with the triple tick marks to improve energy efficiency and conserve energy. We have also started putting companies and giving grants to help companies to pivot into using more solar photovoltaic panels. On top of that, over at EMA itself, given the fact that we don't have a very constant and consistent supply of solar energy, we are also in parallel developing a series of energy storage systems in the form of ESS so that during the time when there's peak solar power, we can actually store up that energy to allow it for use later on. On top of that, in terms of the building of the efficiency, we have encouraged industry to go green, where they can actually use natural ventilation to even working with design consultancy firms in the entire built environment to see how we can actually reduce the need for lowering the temperature in terms of using the air conditioning. I think there are multiple initiatives, and they're probably too numerous for me to go through at length, but these are just some very clear examples of what we have started to work with the industry itself. Thank you.
Mr. Jerogam.
Thank you, sir. Several businesses in my constituency have shared with me their shock at seeing their electricity bills jump threefold or more, despite their efforts to reduce electricity usage. Now, businesses with a consumption of more than 4 megawatt hours, but less than 20 megawatt hours, which include many neighborhood kopitiams, have to buy electricity from SP Group at the wholesale electricity price, which is very elevated and volatile now. So they are also facing difficulty buying electricity from retailers because many retailers are not offering contracts until later in the year or even next year. Can EMA extend TREX for another 6 to 12 months beyond May 2022 in view of the current economic situation and energy supply situation? If this is not possible, can EMA allow these SMEs to buy at the regulated tariff instead so that their operational costs do not skyrocket? Secondly, Minister mentioned that TREX was fully subscribed for the months of January and February. How many businesses applied for during these 2 months under TREX but weren't able to obtain contracts? Are there plans to expand the number of slots in TREX available for those who need it? Thank you.
I thank Mr. Gerald Giam for his question. Can I answer the second question and I go back to the first one? For TREX itself, for January, it was oversubscribed. As I've shared, I think earlier on in my main PQ reply, that for February, there still remains about 200 megawatts left, which I was encouraging many of these SMEs to consider going into this particular retail plan. So as far as the extension of TREX beyond for another 6 months is concerned, we have now extended for March, April, and May. That's 3 months. Our estimates also tie in with generally with consultants, and these are global market consultants who look at the trend of the energy prices. We believe that that there may be, of course, we hope that the situation in Eastern Europe, I think namely that between Russia and Ukraine, doesn't get worse. But once winter is over, we are cautiously optimistic that that the natural gas prices will ease somewhat. So we may not need to extend beyond 6 months. So at this particular point in time, we are monitoring the situation very, very closely. In fact, we don't monitor on a month-to-month basis. We monitor it on a weekly basis, and sometimes, even on a daily basis itself. So I hope that answers your question. Today, tracks will be extended for March, April, through to May. But other than tracks as a scheme, we are also now working to see whether there are any other assistance measures that we can roll out to help. So I hope that answers your second point. For your first question, in terms of the assistance, we have worked with electricity retailers and gencos to lower the cost of buying electricity through eligible contracts to support those businesses that have been affected. I don't have in January how many businesses have not been able to subscribe to tracks. But as a follow-up, what I can do is to try and get the statistics and then answer that either as another PQ that you can file later, or I'll see how to get that answer across. We are also contemporaneously working with gencos to see if they can offer additional temporary discounts at their end. Now, I just want to also manage expectations. These offsets will not be able to help account for the price increase completely, because as I've said before in the past, that this has gone up by threefold since the start of 2021. But I think certainly it will go some way to help companies to adapt to the sudden surge in prices. I hope that clarifies. Thank you.
Mr. Giam.
Sorry, Minister, there's one question which I think wasn't answered, which is it possible for EMA to allow SMEs to buy, I'm talking about SMEs who use between 4 megawatt hours and 20 megawatt hours of electricity a month, for them to buy at the regulated tariff instead of at the wholesale electricity price? Thank you.
I think the reason why we created tracks was because we took into consideration the fact that to sort of expect SP to suddenly open it up to everyone for them to be able to buy, I think they may have difficulty in supplying all that incremental needs, in a short run itself. So I think we need to also understand how the market itself works. Electricity, which is offered through the regulated tariff, is purchased by Singapore Power, or SP, through existing long-term vesting contracts with the gencos. Now, SP has contracted a limited quantity of such long-term electricity contracts, and we have to reserve them for households, for small business consumers who traditionally do not have the bargaining power to negotiate for better retail prices. Now, if we allow for large consumers to switch to the regulated tariffs, then this means that the SP group will now have to contract for additional supply with gencos at higher prices, and or buy additional electricity supply from the SWEM at the prevailing Uniform Singapore Electric Price, or USEP. Now then, this will cause the regulated tariffs to rise. So all households and small consumers who are on the regulated tariff would then have to bear the costs of price stability for the large consumers. So this may not necessarily be fair to the household consumers and the small business owners. Hence, as a result of that, we wanted to make sure that we can segregate it and protect the existing consumers, of which many of them are your residents as well, all right, by making sure that we move and negotiate for a new scheme, tracks, to help those that are in the 4 megawatt to 20 megawatt range. I hope this answers your question. Thank you.
Ms. Ting-Ru.
Thank you, Minister, for your comprehensive reply. So it seems that we have an idea of how many businesses are affected by this, the exit of all these GenCos. But this increased business cost adds to the cost pressures experienced on goods and services in general. And this ultimately goes down to consumers and individuals, our residents at the end. So I would like to know, does the ministry or government track or study the impact that this episode has actually had on the cost of living for individuals? And what are the findings of any such study? Thank you.
I thank Ms. He for a question. I don't have the answer to you at this particular point in time. Perhaps I understand the concerns that you have. If I may humbly request for you to file a PQ, and we certainly will look into it and probably give you a more robust and detailed answer. Thank you.
Mr. Liang Eng-Hua.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I understand that the reason or how the GenCos were able to offer tracks to the mid-sized consumers, the business consumers, is because they can draw on the standby LNG facilities, set up by EMA. So, can I ask the minister: is that the constraint why we can't expand this track scheme further to even larger consumers? First question. And secondly, I'm also concerned that if we keep tapping on these standby facilities, in the event that there's an outbreak of conflict in Ukraine and so on, where LNG prices were to shoot up, do we have enough to manage the volatility that's to come and to secure the energy supply for our consumers?
I thank Mr. Liang for his two fairly insightful questions. I think the first point in terms of the SLNG, the emergency supply, the stockpile, whether it has become a constraint, I think the answer is no. As I've shared many times, that the natural gas we are sufficiently provided for, and we will ensure that we continue to monitor very closely, and if necessary, invest in infrastructure to continue to make sure that our energy resilience and the sufficiency in terms of the supplies will not be compromised. I think to his question about why is it that larger companies cannot enter into longer-term contracts rather than on a month-to-month basis, is that I think that because of the volatility in terms of the prices, as well as the uncertainty that is evolving today, large companies who want to enter into contracts are now entering into contracts at new, very high-priced levels. Now, if they were to lock in a long-term contract of a year or 2 years today, and if the stability comes back to some level of normality, they may find that they are at a disadvantage. Then would they want to unwind the contract that they have gotten themselves in? Likewise, on the GenCo's perspective, they are also not sure whether they can continue to buy or procure gas at current spot prices. In the event that they procure and they sign up with it and the spot prices go up even further, they would take a bigger loss and a bigger impact. So I think it is the kind of bottlenecks that we have today. And so that's why EMA has stepped in to see how we can manage for the current volatility on a short-term basis by offering these 1-month temporary retail electricity contracts. I hope that sort of clarifies.